Okay, we'll go ahead and get started here. First of all, for the record, since we'll have a new recording, I want to make sure to state what this is. So today is December 7, 2022. It's just after 3 p.m. And this is a continuation of the hearing by the Administrative Hearings Office in the court's reference to the State Water Resources Control Board in City of Marina versus RMC Lonestar. And I'm Alan Lilly, presiding hearing officer of the State Water Board's Administrative Hearings Office. I'm not going to ask for reiterative appearances because it looks like everybody's the same from this morning's session. I will ask Mr. Anderson if you can, it looks like for a new recording, you have to change the TRK for Dr. to have that appear correctly on the record. So if you can do that, I would appreciate it. And I did want to let you know, we received email notifications this morning from Cal-Am's attorney. One was an upload that they had uploaded exhibits Cal-Am 118 through 126 and an updated exhibit list. So we moved those over to the folder of Cal-Am exhibits on the AHOFTP folder. Of course, we will rule on admissibility of them later. And then later they advised us they'd uploaded exhibit Cal-Am 127. So we added that as well. In addition, Cal-Am uploaded the deposition transcripts of Todd Kincaid and Vera Nelson and the deposition exhibits. So we have moved those over to our folder of deposition transcripts and deposition exhibits in case anybody needs to or wants to refer to those during cross-examination. I did notice, and this I'll ask for the Cal-Am attorneys, if one of you can explain this, I did notice that you have designated and uploaded exhibit Cal-Am 121 is the transcript of the deposition of Todd Kincaid, and exhibit Cal-Am 122 is the transcript of the deposition of Vera Nelson, both with exhibits. I thought our understanding had been that we would upload those deposition transcripts to our folder of deposition transcripts and the exhibits to our folder of deposition exhibits. And then if they were in fact used during cross-examination, we would have the party doing using the deposition transcript excerpts for cross-examination that would prepare an exhibit just of the cover page of the deposition transcript and the pages of the transcript that were used during the cross-examination, and then of course also any deposition exhibits. So I don't know, Cal-Am, one of the Cal-Am attorneys, can you tell me why you have designated these two transcripts as exhibits Cal-Am 121 and 122?
Sure, this is Michael Betts. We did it both ways, Mr. Lilly, just out of an abundance of caution. And we figured that in terms of designating as an exhibit, we could deal with that later. But to answer your question, it was just out of an abundance of caution.
Okay, well, we'll see. I for the reasons I said before, I don't, unless you have a good reason, I don't plan to admit those transcripts. One's over 500 pages long and the other's over 600 pages long. And there's probably a lot of material in them that is attorney colloquy and so forth, which wouldn't normally be admissible. So
Understood.
We'll deal with that down the road. But and if there is cross-examination, I will ask whoever the Cal-Am attorney is who uses the transcript for cross-examination to prepare a new exhibit with just the cover page and the transcript pages that are actually used. All right.
No problem.
We have thousands of pages of exhibits already, so I'm trying to maintain a little bit of control over that.
Understood. We'll do so. And we also had submitted per your request a while ago a response to the state of affairs on exhibits, all of which we thought we could deal with later. But
yes, I did receive that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. And we hopefully later will be tomorrow when we can deal with the Cal-Am exhibits as well as the MCWD exhibit. So thank you. Okay.
So, Mr. Lilly, if we need to use a depot transcript, do you want us to ask for it then out of the depot transcript folder rather than using the exhibit number that it got assigned?
Yes, I think that's the way we did it for the last round of hearings. I think that would be good to do here as well.
Will do.
I mean, it's the same document, but let's do it that way.
Right.
At least I assume it's the same document.
It is, and I asked only to avoid confusion, given what you just said. We'll not give it a number. We'll call it by its title and refer to it.
And then prepare an exhibit and give it a number later.
Right. Perhaps we'll use what's currently there as the placeholder for the number for later if we need it.
And we might be able to just do that and substitute that in. That would be good, but that's fine. I understand you're being careful. Okay, so which attorney is going to start with cross-examination of which witness this afternoon?
So with your indulgence, Mr. Lilly, Mr. Moore and I have decided to split the time today and then split the time again tomorrow. So he's going to go first, I think primarily for Ms. Nelson, who he took the deposition and prepared for the cross. We understand it's a panel, so there may be more than one person answering, but he'll use roughly half the time this afternoon, and then I'll use the balance, and then we'll resume tomorrow in the same style.
Okay, that's fine. And we'll target to go for about an hour and a half today. So with that, Mr. Moore, you may proceed with your cross-examination of Ms. Nelson, and you know our practice. Please just let us know whenever you want us to screen share any exhibits. But if you are going to ask Ms. Nelson about her testimony, I do like to have the exhibit up on the screen so we all can literally be on the same page. So with that, you may proceed.
Where is she?
Right
no.
here.
Oh, there she is. She's on my left second row tile, so she is here. Go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Nelson, good afternoon. We have met before, correct?
Yes.
Let me ask you some questions. You've been working with MCWD, as I understand it, for somewhere 7 or 8 years, correct?
Yes, in that range.
All right. And your role with them, that is MCWD, is as a consultant, correct?
Correct.
Have you done anything else? I mean, have you been an expert witness? Have you done any other work? Or have you always been your role's always been as a consultant?
My role for MCWD has been as a consultant, with the exception that for this proceeding, I was actually retained by Richards, Watson, and Gershon.
And why was that? Do you know?
I was hired as an expert witness for this proceeding.
And you are an expert in your mind?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And how many times have you testified as an expert?
I have testified once in trial as an expert.
Have you testified anywhere else, any other proceeding as an expert?
I have testified in arbitration, and I have been deposed several times as an expert.
Could you tell me what the subject matter was when you testified as an expert in a arbitration?
It was related to the Chino Basin, and it had to do with groundwater quality within the Chino Basin.
Any other times you can think of right now that you testified as an expert in any proceeding, whether it's an arbitration, trial, could be a lot of things.
Yes, I testified in the Antelope Valley adjudication as an expert.
How long ago was that?
Boy, I'd have to take a look. It's been over 5 years.
Can you tell me, going back the 7 or 8 years you've worked with MCWD as a consultant, what was your first assignment? What did they call you up for initially?
We worked on.
Objection. Ms. Nelson's here to testify as a testifying expert here. Whatever roles she previously had as a consultant are not really relevant and arguably protected.
What's your response, Mr. Moore?
My response is, she's an expert and we can ask her not whatever questions we want within your limitations. But she is not anything other than that. I mean, we're asking her questions and we're entitled to background information. I guess that's
Okay, I'm gonna overrule the objection. I do think her background work for MCWD potentially could be relevant to her opinions in this proceeding. However, if Mr. Brochard, if there's a specific, I don't think this background question qualifies, but if there's a specific question that you think would require Ms. Nelson to waive a privilege, then you may state that at that time. So with that, the objection's overruled. If you can answer the question, Ms. Nelson, go ahead. Otherwise, Mr. Moore can restate it or repeat it.
EKI was retained by Marina Coast Water District in relation to a potential project that they were looking at trying to store water in the dune sand aquifer at Armstrong Ranch through either recycled water or water potentially coming off of the Salinas River.
during the 7 or 8 years you work with them, and always as a consultant, right?
Correct.
All right. And were there other projects that you signed on for when you acted as a consultant?
Yes, EKI was retained to aid MCWD in working on the 180 400-foot aquifer groundwater sustainability plan. They are a GSA that overlies the 180 400-foot aquifer subbasin, and so they are signatory to that document. And they retained EKI to work with Montgomery and Associates in association with that plan and helping develop it.
And I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
We were also retained to prepare the Monterey Subbasin GSP in coordination with Montgomery and Associates for MCWD and the Salinas Valley Basin GSA.
Who first hired you?
Objection vague.
I assume you mean who first hired her related to her work for MCWD. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I think that's okay. If you can answer that question, go ahead.
You mean the individual, or I mean,
Yes.
my contract is with MCWD.
I understand that, but I'm asking about what individual actually hired you for any project with MCWD.
Well, I've worked with several individuals there. I think the first person that we dealt with was Mike Wegley, and he's no longer there. I also worked with Keith Vandermatten, who was previously the GM. I work quite a bit with Patrick Breen, who is the current individual that is in charge of overseeing the groundwater sustainability plans. And of course, I work with Rem Scherzinger, who was recently taking over the GM position.
Let me ask you, over that period of time, if you know, and you may not know, how much money were you paid from MCWD for your services as a consultant or an expert witness, if that's the case?
I don't recall how much money EKI has billed to MCWD over the years.
Do you have any idea, an estimate? I don't, and when I say that, I don't want you to guess, but you have an estimate of how much money you made over those years.
I would have to go back through our records in order to be able to make that estimate.
Okay. And you haven't done it before today, at any time that you remember?
No. We also work on many of the groundwater sustainability plans were developed with the help of grant funds from DWR.
What question were you answering there? If you can let me in on it.
No,
You asked-
Mr. Wait. That's an appropriate additional response. So I'm gonna, if that was supposed to be a motion to strike, I'm gonna overrule it. Just go ahead and answer and ask your next question.
Let me ask you another question. Did you work on a lawsuit, a present lawsuit that was brought in San Jose, California, excuse me, Monterey, California?
And I do, again, Mr. Moore, I don't think you're entirely clear, but is the question, did
Well-
she work for MCWD in connection with the city of Marina versus RMC Lonestar lawsuit separate from her work in the State Water Board proceeding? Is that what you're asking?
I think they're the same proceeding effectively, but yes, that's what I'm asking, what you have articulated.
So if you know, Ms. Nelson, and you may not know what your attorneys were having your work be for, but do you know whether you did any work in connection with the court's proceedings in this case, as opposed to the State Water Board's proceedings?
I mean, I was retained by Richards, Watson, and Gershon to answer questions that were posed by the court. So I guess I'm not sure. I mean, when we first discussed it, that's what was brought up, and the court questions were given to me. And I don't know how that relates. I mean, I know that the state board is involved with it at this point, but I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about, the legal aspects of that as to what one is versus the other.
Let me ask you, you have certain opinions you're going to offer in this case, correct?
Correct.
And can you tell me what they are?
Objection vague.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, Ms. Nelson has probably 200 pages, or at least 150 pages of written proposed testimony, maybe 100 pages, and there are opinions throughout that. And I mean, her document pretty clearly has summaries and then details. So I think it's better if you hone in on it rather than wasting our time trying to get her to summarize what's already in her written materials.
I'm not asking for that, and I'm trying to shorten it because I think you start every deposition with a simple question. What is your opinion? Or what are your opinions? And then you can go directly, still, I don't mean to be disrespectful, to that issue without, asking a lot of other questions. So it's simpler, I think, by going directly to the question.
Right. Well, this is not a deposition. And also, we already have written proposed testimony. So I think it's better if you hone in on specific parts of the written proposed testimony.
Do you have any opinions about the use of the slant wells in this project, with this project?
Yes.
And what is that opinion?
Again, objection vague, calls for a narrative.
I'm going to overrule that objection. I think that's specific enough that Ms. Nelson can answer. And, if the caveat is, here are my general opinions, and obviously there are a lot of details, then she can say that. But go ahead and answer the question. What is your general opinion, or what are your general opinions about the proposed CalAm use of the slant wells for this project?
As stated in my written testimony, it is my opinion that the slant wells will withdraw both fresh water from the inland portions of the 180 and dune sand aquifer, as well as seawater that's drawn into the groundwater system. And that withdrawal of seawater, basically fresh water from the system, has the potential to impact MCWD.
Okay, let me ask you this. I'm sorry, were you done?
I was going to continue, but feel free to.
Okay. All right.
Well, go ahead and continue if you have more to say. It's
Yeah.
a broad question, so a broad answer is appropriate.
Okay. I also believe that the slant wells will draw down groundwater levels along the coastline and in the interface zone, both in the Monterey subbasin and the 180-foot aquifer subbasin. And that drawdown along the coastline and near MCWD's wells has the potential to increase seawater intrusion migration into the aquifers. In fact, it will increase the amount of seawater that enters the aquifers within both the capture zone and outside of the capture zone.
I think, well, let me go back a second. So how much water, fresh water, I guess, or groundwater, do you expect to be at risk? That is, because of the slant wells?
I'm not sure what you mean by be at risk. Can you be more specific? I'm sorry.
Yeah. You said, I think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the slant wells would cause a seawater. Well, why don't you say again what your opinion is, and I can go from there. Yeah.
My opinion is that the slant wells will cause increased migration of saline groundwater into the inland portions of the Monterey and 180-foot aquifer subbasins.
And where did that ground before it was in the slant wells? Where was it before?
It was in the submarine portions of the aquifers.
And that submarine portions, is there groundwater, is there fresh water in those submarine portions of the well?
You mean in the aquifer?
The aquifer, excuse me.
So yes, the submarine portions of the aquifers contain a mixture of ocean water that has been seawater intruded and fresh groundwater that has migrated into those submarine portions of the aquifer.
And how
And there are some, I'm sorry, there are some portions like in the deep aquifer, those portions of the submarine aquifer are in fact fresh.
and where did that fresh water come from? In the deep aquifer?
From inland areas. So what happens is basically you get rainwater and infiltration in the inland areas, which starts out fresh, of course. It infiltrates into the aquifers and then migrates towards the ocean in most cases, like in the case of the dune sand aquifer. And however, over time, because of the overpumping in the Salinas Valley Basin, in the 180-foot aquifer and the 400-foot aquifer, there have been inland gradients that have been created over the last 20, 30 years. And so now there's been a reversal of the flow from the submarine portions of the aquifer towards the inland portions.
The basin is groundwater intrusion right now, correct?
There are aquifers which are groundwater intruded within the Salinas Valley Basin.
And can you tell me what percentage of the are of groundwater intrusion?
Do you mean seawater intrusion?
I mean seawater intrusion. Thank you.
But just go ahead and restate the question, Mr. Moore, so it's clear on the record.
So what percentage of the has a seawater intrusion right now as we're sitting here?
Are you at which basin are you discussing? The
Actually,
Monterey subbasin, the 180-foot aquifer
No.
subbasin?
I'm asking that you tell me what subbasins or basins are suffering from seawater intrusion.
Both the Monterey subbasin and the 180-foot aquifer subbasin have aquifers that are seawater intruded. In the Monterey subbasin, only the very westerly portion of the subbasin contains seawater intrusion in the lower 180-foot aquifer and in the 400-foot aquifer. There is more extensive seawater intrusion in the 180, 400-foot aquifer subbasin in both the 180-foot aquifer and in the 400-foot aquifers.
Can you tell me, as you sit here now and we're sitting here, what is the cause of that?
Overpumping within the Salinas Valley Basin.
And what responsibility for overpumping does MCWD have?
MCWD is one of the pumpers within the Salinas Valley Basin. However, they pump on average, let's just say 4,000 acre feet per year. It's varied over time. The overall withdrawals are in the range of 500,000 acre feet per year.
So what is the,
And just, so, excuse me, Ms. Nelson, but can you clarify 500,000 acre feet per year? Is that for the entire Salinas Valley groundwater basin, or is that for certain subbasins?
That's for the entire, in the 180-foot aquifer subbasin, the groundwater extraction is over 100,000 acre feet per year.
Okay, thank you.
so when you say seawater intrusion, is there a level of saline in these different aquifers that qualify for seawater intrusion? Is there a starting point? Maybe it's the best way to put this.
Well, there's variable degrees of seawater intrusion. TDS concentrations vary across the basin, but in the absence of seawater intrusion, there are in the Monterey subbasin, TDS concentrations I can speak to are generally in the range of between 300 and 600 milligrams per liter. There are some areas that are slightly more.
I'm sorry, when you say slightly more, what's the numbers?
The Watkins Gate well can have as much as 1,000, I believe. I'd have to go back and look, but I definitely know that there's naturally occurring TDS concentrations as high as 1,000 milligrams per liter in some areas of the Monterey subbasin. And I'd have to look at the GSP to identify exactly where those are.
And that would be the highest amount of TDS anywhere in the basin?
No, so those are naturally occurring. They're not a result of seawater intrusion. In other words, they're the result of naturally occurring salts, minerals within the sediments themselves. Yeah. And then in addition, you have elevated chloride and TDS concentrations that are migrating into the basin from basically the submarine portions of the aquifer, which have basically higher concentrations of saline water that's infiltrated from the ocean. And there are areas within the Monterey subbasin which have as high as 10,000 milligrams per liter of TDS.
Okay. Can you tell me the progress, or not the progress, the management of this seawater intrusion? 10 years ago, what was it like? What were the numbers? How have they changed over the last 10 years?
In the Monterey subbasin, the seawater intrusion front has been pretty stable over the last 15 years. And that's mapped out in the groundwater, in the Monterey subbasin groundwater sustainability plan. In the 180-foot aquifer subbasin, there has been progression of the seawater intrusion front inland over the last 10 years.
And how much increase was there? I mean, can you quantify it for me?
I would have to go look into the GSP to see, it varies by aquifer, in the 180-foot aquifer versus the 400-foot aquifer. I can't tell you exactly the rate of migration. There's also situations where the saline water has moved from the 180-foot aquifer down into the 400 aquifer because people have installed wells that have perforated the aquitard. And so you can't tell if it's moved as a result of inland gradients or if it's actually just moved downward.
Yeah.
It's not a simple question.
Good. Thank you. The next question is, and I'm not sure you answered. I think you tried to answer it, but I'm not sure you have. So I'll take I'll ask it again. To what extent is MCWD responsible or a participant in the intrusion?
MCWD has extracted groundwater within the subbasin, which is seawater intruded. So it is a participant in that seawater intrusion. If you're asking me whether or not the basin would be seawater intruded in the absence of MCWD, the answer is yes.
Can you calculate? I know the answer. Can you calculate anything that will tell you or me or someone what extent or at what level is that seawater intrusion a public safety issue?
Yes, I don't know what you mean by a public safety issue. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Can you phrase the question
Let
more?
me phrase it a little bit differently. I think your opinion includes that that slant wells will create more seawater intrusion when they're pumping, right? That's one of your opinions.
Yes.
And that is increasing the seawater intrusion is not something that you want or your client wants, correct?
Correct.
All right. So what level does it have to be that my client has hit a level where there's a chance that there will be more seawater intrusion because of their pumping than before?
I'm still struggling with the question. I mean, increases in seawater intrusion, in other words, increases in concentrations of TDS potentially harm the basin. If the question is at what point does it exceed drinking water standards, I can answer that. There are secondary drinking water standards for TDS as well as chloride. And there are other criteria, as I've discussed, associated with the beneficial use. So if the question is at, more TDS and seawater intrusion is not a good thing. And at some point you exceed these specific criteria.
Well, what I'm asking is, what are the specific criteria?
Well, the California Code of Regulations identifies a secondary MCL for TDS of 500 milligrams per liter,
okay.
And a long-term max of approximately 1,000, and then a short-term max of 1,500. I'm sorry, let me try again. 500, 1,000, 1,500 is the California Code of Regulations for TDS.
Okay.
The beneficial use standard identified by the State Water Resources Control Board in this for the basin plan, under the basin plan, is 3,000 milligrams per liter TDS. EPA also has a criteria at 10,000 milligrams per liter TDS, at which point which it uses to evaluate where you can inject brine.
Okay. You used the term a few minutes ago, interface zone. You recall that?
Yes, I described it in my testimony.
Yeah. And what is an interface zone? What is the interface?
It's an area that was defined as part of the cross complaint to include the area basically south of the Salinas River, across the Monterey subbasin where the dune sand is located, dune sand aquifer is located. It includes the area of the slant wells and MCWD's production wells. And it was defined because the slant wells are actually located in the 180-foot aquifer subbasin, and MCWD's wells are located in the Monterey subbasin. And the interface zone is an area where there are no there's no barriers to flow within the aquifers. So groundwater can flow within these aquifers laterally with no impedance within this interface zone. And so it was defined for the purposes of the cross complaint to easily be able to discuss this area, which includes both the slant wells and the MCWD's wells.
This is a term you just made up, correct?
It is a term that was defined for the purposes of the cross complaint for the purpose that I identified.
Who defined it, you or someone else?
It was discussed between the attorneys and the experts.
So why didn't you tell anybody else the definition for an interface zone? I'd never heard the term before, nor had my clients.
It's defined in the cross complaint.
So it's a new term defined in the cross complaint that is one piece of property now, the interface zone, that did cover before two different basins or subbasins, correct?
Well, it includes a portion of the 180-foot aquifer subbasin and a portion of the Monterey subbasin.
So you're taking a portion of one subbasin and putting it in another subbasin, and the reason for that's real simple. You want both the Cal-Am slant wells and the MCWD wells to be coming out of the same area, same piece of property. And then
I didn't make them the same basin. The basins are defined by DWR.
I'm sorry, I misspoke if you heard that. I did not. I said what you did is you put them together, call it an interface zone, which has nothing to do with it. And now you can claim that both people's slant wells can be drawn from the same spot, or at least it's confusing, I think, right? Did you intend to confuse anyone?
No, we actually tried to make it more understandable, because sometimes people believe that because there's a basin boundary in the way, it's a political boundary. It's not a physical boundary. And so what we try to do is explain that although there is this political boundary which DWR has drawn between these two subbasins, there's no physical reason that the groundwater can't move between the two areas.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying, why didn't you tell anybody? And you didn't tell us. We didn't know what you were talking about. And you knew we didn't know what you were talking about because you never told us.
I'm going to object as argumentative and unintelligible. If I'm not mistaken, the models that we're using include both areas.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Mr. Moore, I think it's about 90% argumentative, and the other 10%, I don't hear a question in there. So please try to either move on or restate it in the form of a question rather than an argument.
I'll be happy to. Isn't it true that when you came up with one name for these two areas, you gained the benefit of saying that the Marina Coast wells and the Cal-Am wells were in the same position and close to each other, under the same designation. Isn't that true?
I think we just defined an area which is hydrologically connected.
Well, there were things there. Why did you feel like you had to create a piece of land under one name that you could later say both the anyway, both the parties' wells were in the same piece of property, close to each other, when they're not close to each other, right? That was the purpose.
I think I've answered the question.
Maybe. Let me ask you one more question. Why didn't you tell us? I mean, if you're doing it so there's no confusion, the people that you have all the arguments with or all the cases with is us. We're the one that needs the explanation. You didn't give us an explanation, did you?
I think it's defined in the cross complaint. And I believe that the interface zone is also defined and discussed in my expert testimony and the basis for why it was identified.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that, but
All right, no editorial comments, please, Mr. Moore. Stick to questions.
let me ask you, is there Dr. Trudell? Is it Trudell? Yeah. Is a colleague of yours, correct?
You mean, does he work for EKI?
No, I'm saying he's a colleague of yours. You work together.
I guess I'm not sure what you mean by that. I mean, I don't work with him at EKI. I am aware of Dr. Trudell, but I mean, I don't work closely with him, no.
Did he work with you on this project?
Objection, vague is the project.
This lawsuit?
Why don't you just ask? I think you can get through this a lot quicker, Mr. Moore, if you ask it as a non-leading question. Why don't you just ask her what was her working relation with Dr. Trudell and what topics did it cover?
Mr. Lilly, I think I will do that. It's your demand, but I think it's quicker to use leading questions and get the question out, get your answer, hopefully, and move on.
Okay, well, proceed as you deem appropriate, but I think it's going to be quicker if you ask it the way I suggested.
I will certainly consider. I think it's my time is up for Mr. Osias.
Okay,
right.
so just so we're clear, Mr. Moore, I just want to get a handle, and that's fine. You can continue tomorrow. I realize it's going to be a little bit disconnected, but that's fine. But do you have, based on what you've covered today, do you have an estimate for how much time you think you're going to be taking tomorrow with your cross-ex of Ms. Nelson?
I would hope somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour, I think. It may be over a little bit, but not much, if it is.
Okay, I'm going to put down 45 to 60 minutes more estimated cross-ex time. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, and with that, let me just write that down. All right, so with that, Mr. Osias, you may proceed with your cross-examination. I'm assuming he's here somewhere. Lost
I'm
him.
here. I'm here.
No, No, you, I need the witness though.
Oh, and he's here too.
I'm here. I'm here, Mr. Lilly.
Okay, there you are. Sorry, I've got my tiles moving around. So Mr. Asias, you may proceed with your cross-ex of Dr. Kincaid.
Although I know time is precious.
Go ahead.
These Zoom meetings with multiple tiles, when people speak or whatever, and they move around, I get lost also. So
It beats having to all drive or fly to Sacramento.
I'm not complaining about the lack of travel. Thank you very much. Okay.
Go ahead.
And Dr. Kincaid just moved and now he's next to me, which is on the screen. So that's even better.
Yeah, that's
Now it
good.
looks like I'm looking at him and I can see myself.
Go
So
ahead.
Dr. Kincaid, nice to see you again. We spent almost all of Friday together. Is that right? At your deposition?
Yes, sir.
Okay, could we, and I apologize, Mr. Lee, I didn't know the exhibit number for Dr. Kincaid's slides, but if we could put those back up.
Okay, I think that's exhibit MCWD 118.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
is.
And we will post exhibit MCWD 118, and I'll get my paper copy. Go ahead.
Thank you. Now, Dr. Kincaid, we didn't have these slides when you were deposed on Friday, correct?
I don't know. I thought these slides had been submitted.
Okay. When did you prepare them?
I did.
When did you finish?
I finished with these slides last week.
Monday, Wednesday? Have an
Uh,
estimate?
It would have been, I'm sorry, I've got a lot going on right now, so trying to keep track of exact times are unclear. I know there was a time, I believe these were originally, it was originally said that the hearing slides were due on Friday, and I completed them then, but then I do remember that there was an extension, so they may not have been filed until the date of the extension. So maybe they were filed on Monday. I apologize. I don't mean to be evasive. I can't honestly remember exactly when, but it was in the last few days, but I believe I had completed the majority of these slides or all of them before our deposition by the original time, whenever the original date was told to me that they needed to be done.
So they were done by 1 p.m. on Friday?
I believe they were, because I know that there was I worked to get these completed, and then there was I was informed that there was an extension provided, and so then we delayed. Then we had a discussion about them, and I'm not exactly sure at that point when they were submitted. So they must have been submitted after the Friday deadline, and I presume they were submitted prior to the extended deadline.
And 3 days before last Friday is when you produced, or your lawyers produced, the documents that we had subpoenaed for the deposition. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Yes. Again, I apologize for not being able to answer explicit days and times. But yes, I have knowledge of preparing my testimonies and the reports that were associated with them.
Okay. And the slides were not included in what was produced because they weren't done yet, correct?
That's correct. The report and my testimony was done and submitted in advance of compiling these slides.
But I was actually referring to the document production for the depot. The slides weren't in the document production.
No, that's correct. The document production for the deposition that did not include the slides.
Okay. So now we're back to the question I started with, which is, I did not have the slides to ask you questions about at your deposition on Friday, correct?
Okay, sorry. Yes, I agree with that.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, just the exact timing of things, I'm not sure about. I know that I know you did not have these slides at the deposition.
And so I didn't ask you any questions about them. That's why I'm going to do it right now for the first time.
Yes, sorry, exactly.
Okay, so if we could turn to page 21.
Okay, I assume you mean slide 21, which we will.
Yes,
still
I'm
do.
sorry, Mr. Lilly. Yes, the slide 21.
Go ahead.
And you recall discussing this earlier today.
Yes.
And the italicized language at the bottom under the right quadrant says adapted from testimony of P. Loeffler 2022. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and you saw these conceptual illustrations in his testimony or slideshow or slides submittal or both?
It was both, and then these are actually directly exported from my my rebuttal testimony. So I saw those, and I saw the conceptual model itself in the document that was supplied for his testimony, and I believe it was the testimony itself. And then I used that the graphic from that document to create these slides that I included in my rebuttal testimony. And then I extracted those and then recycled those and used them again for the hearing slides that you see right here.
So do you recall, and Mr. Lilly, I'll show him if I need to, but do you recall that Mr. Loeffler had a slide that did not include the slant well and showed seawater intrusion proceeding from the ocean all the way to the wedge in the 180-foot aquifer with no interruption because there was no slant well? Do you remember that picture?
I don't remember it explicitly, but I can envision it and would understand what that would be depicting. Yes, I don't think that's a overall conceptually at the broad scale of this. I don't think there's a contention there.
Well, why don't we put up Cal-Am 4?
Okay, give us a moment and we will display exhibit Cal-Am 4.
And then if we could go to slide 13.
Okay, so we'll do that slide.
This is the
Slide 13 we have. Okay, go ahead.
yes, thank you. This is the picture I was trying to describe. It looks familiar.
It does look familiar.
Okay. And then slide 17.
Okay, we'll go to slide 17 of exhibit Cal-Am 4.
And this is similar to one of the slides or one of the conceptual drawings in your slide deck, correct? Similar.
Yes, as I said, I adapted these from his conceptual model so that grossly we could be talking about the same thing. And then I hope I was clear about the changes that I made, one of which includes the depiction of freshwater contribution from the dune sand aquifer into the 180-foot aquifer, which contributes to the location of the, as he labels it here, the SWI wedge.
Okay.
So those are depicted in my cross sections that are not depicted in this. So those are deviations, obviously, from what Mr. Loeffler has depicted here.
So Dr. Kincaid, in an effort to maximize the time and minimize the duration of your answers, I'd ask you to try to answer my question. And if you feel the need for a longer narrative, it's okay. But I was just trying to have you make sure you were oriented that this was similar. Do you see the blue box underneath the 180/400 aquitard with the blue arrow pointing up?
Yes, I see the box, yes.
Okay. And in this illustration, the seawater intrusion that was in slide 13 is either eliminated or reduced.
Again, this would be a degree to which I disagree with the depiction. And I think I was very clear about why the cone of depression or the drawdown will extend further than the capture zone. So that can't be depicted in this cross-sectional view. And the seawater intrusion will simply go around the capture zone and continue to intrude into the aquifer. So in other words, there would be lines in and out of the page that are as depicted here.
So can we go back to slide 13, recognizing it again, it's just a conceptual drawing.
Okay, we'll go back to slide 13.
So is it your testimony then that none of this seawater intrusion that is currently flowing in the absence of the slant well will be captured by the slant well?
No, it's not my,
Okay.
it will capture the, and within the capture zone, it will capture the water from that's flowing landward from the ocean.
So how much of the water in the pre-slant well situation from the ocean into the 180 will be captured by the slant well, and how much will be left?
Well, so as I understand your question, I think what you're asking me is how much of the pre-existing seawater intrusion will be captured by the slant well, therefore presuming that the seawater intrusion will go down. To be clear, I did not run that analysis, but the analysis that we have run indicates that somewhere between 77 and 90-ish% of the extraction will be from the ocean, and the rest will come from the land. So roughly 70% or 70 to 90% of the water will be presumably capturing the lines that are depicted in this drawing, and the rest will flow around it. The analysis that we did do shows that between pumping and no pumping, the model indicates that in all of this scenarios evaluated by the 2022 model anyway, the seawater intrusion will increase both inside the capture zone as expected and outside the capture zone. So it's not, I'm sorry, I can't answer the question exactly, but those are the analyses that I performed.
So at the moment, at least, you're willing to admit that some of the seawater intrusion that left the ocean and flew, if that's the right word, flowed into the 180 in the absence of the slant wells will be captured by the slant wells. Somewhere.
Yes, as I believe we've actually, I know, even in our capture zones, we have not delineated the portion of the capture zone that extends into the ocean. So yes, the wells will capture water that was already flowing from the ocean in the landward direction. So yes, it will capture a portion of the pre-existing seawater intrusion that is occurring in the 180-foot aquifer.
Okay, thank you. So can we go back then to your slides? Just wanted to clarify and we were on slide 21.
Okay, so just for the record, we now have exhibit MCWD 118, slide 21 on the screen. Go ahead.
Okay, and you did not include at least our illustration of the seawater intrusion that was pre-existing and captured here, correct?
No, because these are depicting the purpose, as I stated in the hearing, in all cases, the purpose here is to demonstrate the effect of recharge and gradient on the position of the capture zone relative to the balance of flows between the DSA and the 180-foot aquifer and the location and westward extent of the forward SVA. So I I didn't, no, these graphics do not depict what happens when the proposed slant wells are not pumping.
And actually, let me just take a detour from your slides for 1 minute. One sort of maybe overarching goal of an investigation of the impacts of the slant wells is to compare the no pumping situation to a pumping situation. Would that be fair?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Can we go back one slide to slide 20?
Okay, we'll have exhibit MCWD 118, slide 20 on the screen.
Dr. Kincaid, this slide was not part of your testimony in MCWD exhibit 114, correct?
That's correct.
Nor was it part of your report that was filed with respect to your SIR rebuttal work that is MCWD exhibit 115.
It was, well, actually, it was at least in part described in both of those. There was a section that I included that said described analyses or broadly described analyses that I believed should be done that I had not had time to do. And this particular one was described, I believe, explicitly in that section of the report. So I basically said that we really should do a more detailed water budget analysis, looking at it zone by zone, which requires a lot more time and effort, because you have to do, we see 12 water budgets that need to be, or 10 water budgets that need to be extracted for every layer and every scenario right on that screen.
So you did that after submission of your SIR rebuttal testimony and report in support of your SIR rebuttal testimony.
That work was actually underway, but not completed, and it was not. So I didn't feel comfortable including even preliminary results from it, because I needed it to be completed and QC'd before I could say something directly about it. But
And
so
your
it was not completed at the time that my testimony, that I filed my testimony. No, it wasn't.
And your testimony said it was being worked on, or it said it's something that should be worked on, but you didn't have time?
It said that yes, it the latter. It said, it described it as one of the analyses that I believed needed to be done, but that I did not have time to complete.
Can we go to slide 17?
Okay, exhibit MCWD 118, slide 17.
Now, just to make sure I'm not misreading your slide, this is depicting a no recharge compared to a recharge capture zone for the 180-foot aquifer based on the 2016 North Marina model?
Yes, on the left are the gradients for 7 and 11 versions of the 2016 model that Mr. Weiss received from Hydro Focus and that were submitted to us. When we requested these, and the gradient 0.001 depictions are an adaptation that we created. And then on the right is Mr. Weiss's versions, in which 5 inches per year of recharge were added.
Okay. And you created this, you created the slide?
I created this slide in cooperation with my team, yes.
Okay, and there are a number of MCWD wells on these 2 comparative illustrations, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And in fact, in the one with recharge, at least with respect to the yellow coloring depicting the 0.0001, it reaches some of those wells, correct?
Yes, it depicts that the capture zone will be in the vicinity of those wells.
And none of the wells on these illustrations are screened in the 180. Isn't that correct?
That I can't speak to. I know I've been told now that there are 3 wells that are not, I don't believe are depicted here. In honesty, I wanted to use these wells as a way of spatial projection. I believe in the original graphic, we had the red circle that you can see a piece of on the bottom right of the graphic. And we were told that that was the vicinity of the wells that were screened in the 180-400. So it's just they're just used there as a way of spatial relation. So
So
but
you were not
no-
trying to create the impression that under a recharge setting as modeled by Weiss, that the 180-foot aquifer capture zone would affect the wells shown on the picture. You were not trying to create that impression.
I was trying to create the impression that the size, the spatial extent of the capture zone is predicted to expand, and that under those conditions, it will expand to the extent that it reaches out in the vicinity of and surrounding the MCWD wells. And as I said, in the original graphic that I had, I used the red circle, which is actually carries the label MCWD wells, because I was told that's where the wells that are screened in the 180 are located.
So that's still some distance and off the picture, correct?
That's at the bottom right corner of the picture, and yes, outside of the capture zones as are depicted in those graphics.
All right. Can we go to slide 9?
Okay, we'll go to MCWD 118, slide 9.
You prepared this slide in conjunction with Ms. Nelson, or after seeing Ms. Nelson's work, or independently?
Prepared this slide after seeing Ms. Nelson's work on this, and after the discussion of it, and then I prepared this slide. I actually also went back and queried the data from the model data sets themselves and independently reproduced it.
Did you, so you have no problem with my treating this slide as your testimony?
I have no problem with that, no.
Okay. And before creating this, did you look at CalAm 36? Which, if you need to know what that is, I'd ask Mr. Lilly
Yeah,
staff to show you.
That's asking a lot for him to know what that
No,
exhibit is off the top of his head. So let's go ahead and post.
I could read him, it has a long name. I think it'd be better for him to see the
I
cover.
think it'd be better if we post, let's post exhibit CalAm 36 and we'll go to the first page. Okay, why don't you just, yeah.
I had looked, yes, I hadn't read this in detail, but I had looked at this technical memorandum, yes.
So you're aware then that pages 47 to 51 address the match between modeled effects and the test slant well effects.
Let's scroll to page 47 and take a look.
And by the way, it's PDF. Yes, thank you. I tried to find the PDF number.
Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah, just scroll down a little bit, Ms. Mullen, to it looks like the section 5.2.2 starts with model calibration. So I go ahead and repeat your question, Mr. Rosales. I just wanted to have it in front of me.
Well, my question was simply, he was aware that there was PDF pages 47 to 51 addressing the match or not between test slant well pumping and model simulation. You were aware of that, right, Dr. Kincaid?
Yes, but we're now talking about apples and oranges.
Okay.
This document was written, and this particular discussion was describing the CMEX model, which was a smaller scale model. According to the report, we did do some analyses of the CMEX model itself back in 2017 when this, as part of our review of this of the modeling that was done as part of the DEI or the EIR at this time. So it has been a few years since I looked at this, but we looked at both the 2016 version of the North Marina model at that time and the CMEX model, and did see, and I believe I understand how and why this was done. This was done to try to better calibrate and get a better estimate for hydraulic conductivities in the vicinity of the test slant well. And they did that by looking specifically at the drawdown. But now we're not talking about the CMEX model anymore. We're talking about the 2022 North Marina groundwater model, which no longer matches the drawdowns in this that were represented by this data. So as far as I'm concerned, this doesn't have any bearing on the 2022 model.
Okay, so would your answer be the same with respect to figures 27 to 38 found on pages PDF 47 to 51? Oh, wait, sorry, I gave you these pages. Just figure 27 to 38, and I didn't write the PDF down. I apologize, Mr. Lilly.
Figures what, 27?
To 38.
Okay, let's scroll down. Miss Mullen's quite good at finding these things. Let's see if you can scroll down to figure 27. We don't have a PDF page, but it'll be obviously down quite a few pages. I think the figures are after all the text. So
I believe that is correct. Sorry.
So scroll down quite a bit here if you could.
What figures?
Oh my goodness, though. It's 550 out of 200. Yeah, there we go. They're 2,105 pages here. So
What figures are we looking for again?
27.
I think you may have gone too far.
And now you're in the appendices.
No,
So
The figures are before the appendices. This is really a challenge in the E format, but we'll get there.
I apologize, and I will try to find tonight all the PDF pages.
Yeah,
But
just go ahead.
I guess
scroll,
I
see if
can probably shorten this because I can go ahead and say that this report in its totality here, well, not totality because it talks about other things, but the sections that we're talking about now, which is the match of the model to observed drawdowns, were done for the CMEX model. So this is not the 2022 model. And at least to the extent the report described it, they were done in an effort to try to get a better handle on hydraulic conductivities in the area immediately around the test slant well. And then presumably, and I believe at the time, those hydraulic conductivities were at least got as imported as guidance to the hydraulic conductivities ultimately assigned in the North Marina model. But now those hydraulic conductivities have been changed because we're no longer talking about the CMEX model nor the 2016 model, but we're talking about the 2022 model. And the changes to those hydraulic conductivities were part of what I talked about earlier.
Well, I don't want to be argumentative, and I'll advise Mr. Lilly that our experts will want to address the relevance of their match as compared to the slide.
yeah, well, I mean, undoubtedly that's on our list of questions too. So
okay.
But I'm going to ask Mr. Woldridge to make a note of it since you've mentioned it. I'm going to state it as CalAm expert witnesses response to MCWD testimony about calibration of the 2022 model. Is that what you're getting at?
Yes, but it's not only the 2022 model, because as you'll hear, and as you have seen, and I don't think we need this page on the screen right now.
Okay, we'll go
Dr.
ahead and
King-
take it down.
Dr. Kincaid uses the HydroFocus 2016 model sometimes. He also has issues with the calibration of that.
Okay, well, you
And the
don't need to
Weiss,
get into
the Weiss
argument.
variations.
You don't need to get into argument now, but certainly one of the issues I will want CalAm witnesses, expert witnesses to respond to are these arguments about I'll say that how good or how bad the calibration is. And we will have that be both for the 2022 model and for earlier versions. Is that fair enough for now?
Yeah, I mean, that is an important topic for a variety, that relates to a variety of other consequences. Dr. Kincaid, you were aware, of course, that the CEMEX model was incorporated by HydroFocus in its 2016 model?
Yes, I'm aware that the modeling for the CEMEX model was done to help inform the modeling, the larger model. Yes, I understand that.
Okay. And then lastly, on your slides, let's go to slide 6.
Okay, and just for the record.
Actually, I apologize. Let me go to slide 4 first, and then we'll go back.
Okay, we're in exhibit MCWD 118, and we're at slide 4. Go
And I
ahead.
just, I'm old school, so I always read the labels on the axis. And this is a slide that deals with, this is a yes or no question to save time. It deals with residuals, correct?
Yes,
And residuals are measured in feet, correct?
yes.
Okay, now can we go to slide 6?
Okay, we'll go to slide 6, same exhibit.
And the heading is spatial distribution of residuals. Do you see that?
Yes,
And the legend talks about the calibration residuals. And in fact, it's the spatial distribution of the root mean square error, correct?
actually, I acknowledge this is a mistaken heading. This is, as I described in the testimony, this is showing the relative error at each, calculated individually at each of the wells, which is the root mean square error, which is the sum of average square residuals divided by the observed range and head at that particular well for the calibration period.
So it's not the spatial distribution of residuals, correct?
That's correct. It's the spatial distribution. This is showing the spatial distribution of relative error.
Can we see CalAm 89?
We can post exhibit CalAm 89. That's a new one, so it'll take just a minute. Okay, this was Dr. Ye's technical memorandum. What page would you like us to scroll to?
Well, I wanted to make sure that the witness, he could
Oh, I'm
might scroll
sorry.
down to see that. I'm glad you recognize it, Mr. Lilly. But let's
Yes, I recognize this document.
Thank you. And then we can go to PDF page 63. Assuming I counted right. And if you scroll down just a little bit. Thank you. This, in fact, is the spatial distribution of the average residuals for the 2022 model, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, we can take that
For
back.
water years 2000, yes, 2000 to 2019.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to not read the whole title.
That's okay.
So we can take this down now.
Okay.
Dr. Kincaid, you are a very experienced expert with respect to karst hydrogeology, correct?
Yes,
But the karst aspect of that pretty much has no relevance to the Monterey Bay or Salinas Valley. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And you told me at your deposition that you assisted a law firm with comments to an EIR for the city of Colton. But other than that, you have no Sigma experience. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And you also told me that other than one effort, perhaps as long ago as 20 years in the North Florida area, you haven't done anything regarding seawater intrusion, correct?
No, I said there was only one instance in which I'd looked explicitly or built models to address seawater intrusion.
Okay.
I've done lots of field work and worked with people on seawater intrusion before.
If we, to save time, I'll ask you first, but we can put it up if you need it. In your 18-page CV, which is MCWD Exhibit 17, is there any reference to consulting work or expert work with respect to seawater intrusion?
No, there's not.
Now, you were first hired in 2015 also, correct?
Yes,
And somewhere in that year, you started working collaboratively with Curtis Hopkins and Ms. Nelson, correct?
with Curtis Hopkins, I did not directly with Miss Nelson. Well, not with Miss Nelson.
Okay. And I think you said something to the effect that you worked from about 2015 to 2017, but it was about a year's worth of work, even though it spanned a longer period of time. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
I think I actually said it was more like a couple of months worth of work during that time period.
Okay.
So, yes.
And that was focused on the EIR that was being used by the Public Utilities Commission, correct?
Well, I can't speak to how the EIR was being used, but I was approached by Mr. Hopkins and then Mr. Wilkins to help them evaluate explicitly to help evaluate the modeling that had been done as part of the EIR that was submitted at that time. So, yes.
Okay. And then at least since 2017, you have continued to be a consultant, but until May of 2022, not with respect to the Salinas Valley groundwater basin?
Well, as a consequence of our discussion and deposition, I went back and checked, and I did have some correspondence, and I did offer a response or some suggestions about the Weiss scope of work that was being prepared or that he had prepared and proposed, and that was in 2018. But other than that, in between those two periods, no, I have not had any. I have not done any work for this project.
Okay. And that's a memory that came to you after we finished our deposition on Friday.
It's not a memory. It's that at the time I said that I thought, and I wanted to go back and make sure that I didn't misstate. And so I did see that I had authored a letter regarding, I looked at the Weiss scope of work and authored a letter with some comments about that scope of work. And that was done in 2018.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that you, actually, let me back up. I think you testified earlier today that when you're asked to review or evaluate a model, what you like to do is open it up, take it apart, evaluate it, and run scenarios. Is that a fair characterization of what you said earlier today?
Yes,
And you have done that with respect to the HydroFocus 2016 superposition model?
yes,
And you've done that with respect to the 2020 Weiss evaluation, modification, and use of the North Marina model?
yes, the Weiss 2020 models and the transient 2016 HydroFocus model and the CMEX model, and the 2022 model. Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Lilly, I have on a topic that's somewhat related, more than 3 minutes. But so the question is, do you want me to finish
Well,
that
if
topic up?
Tell me what the somewhat related topic is and how many minutes you estimate. And I understand it's just an estimate.
Yeah, my estimate is probably 15 or 20, and it's to run through the complete list of other models and other studies that Dr. Kincaid did not
What I didn't hear you.
evaluate and do that.
Okay. Okay, I think I said we'd stop around 4:30, and I know I sort of pushed you and Mr. Moore to do your cross-examination. Dale, frankly, I think you were both quite well prepared. So if it was last minute, it didn't show. I think you both did very well. But I think,
Trust me, it's last minute.
well, you've done this a few times before, I think. So what is, including that, if we stop right now, what is your time estimate for finishing your cross-ex of Dr. Kincaid?
Probably an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay. I think I'm writing down 70 minutes just so I've got it here. And I wrote down Mr. Moore 45 to 60 minutes. So we're in good shape for tomorrow. We'll see. I mean, I'll have my staff and I'll have some questions, although I don't think it's a lot. It's probably in the order of half an hour. So I appreciate your doing this today. I just was concerned that we wouldn't wrap up tomorrow, but let's plan. I think we better still start at 9 tomorrow. So you can, Mr. Asias and Mr. Moore, you decide which one of you wants to go. Hopefully, probably Mr. Moore, just from a time point of view,
Right.
Hopefully can finish in that 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock block. And then, as I say, I have a requirement for my employer from the State Water Board that I have to do from 10 to 11. And then we'll target after that for us to get to the other of you doing those examinations. And then we'll probably take our lunch break and we'll get to my questions and any redirect if there is any, and processing exhibit. So I just know how these things go. It'll end up taking most of the day tomorrow, but hopefully then we can take a break and you can all go back to your other matters on Friday, and we'll come back on Monday. So I think that's a good plan. Any comments on that? Otherwise, that's my plan for tomorrow at 9 a.m. And please do be prepared in the afternoon to address what exhibits you want to offer into evidence. And I will go through Mr. Betts's email regarding the other CalAm exhibits. And then, of course, there'll be some new ones as well. And of course, MCWD will have several exhibits to offer into evidence. So if you can all be ready for that, that would be good.
So I wanted to make sure either I wasn't misunderstood or I didn't misunderstand your question. I had that additional 15 minutes on the things that haven't been looked at. And then beyond that, I estimated 70 minutes.
Oh, you're pulling a fast one on me.
No.
Mr.
I
Sias.
thought that's what you asked me. Because I thought you
I
said,
said-
other than that, how much do you estimate? And it was something to that
I
effect.
said including, I thought I said including.
Okay,
that,
then
or I may not
that's
have.
why I'm seeking clarification.
All right, I'm going to put down 90 for you then. So
Thank you.
all the more reason. So if it works well, I prefer to have Mr. Moore go first with hopefully being able to finish in the hour, and then shifting back to you, Mr. Osias. I mean, if it doesn't, that's okay, but that just seems like from a time point of view, that'll work a little more logically if we can do it that way.
Thank you.
So, okay, so anything else for today, or can we just reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 and go from there? All right, so thank you all very much. And, you know, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I do appreciate all of your professional demeanors in this proceeding. I know that there are a lot of contested issues, but I appreciate the way you're all conducting yourselves professionally, both the attorneys and the witnesses. So it certainly makes it a more pleasant process for me and my colleagues. So with that, I will see you all at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Have a good afternoon and evening.